My job was to hold the ultrasound probe on the woman's abdomen during the abortion. I just remember watching in horror when the abortion began. I just saw this baby trying to get away from that abortion instrument, and this baby was fighting and struggling for its life.
I remember walking in there and walking out knowing I just died. You receive life and then life gets taken away from you. There's a real robbery that's happening.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I had believed for so long that, you know, this tissue was nothing. It was just something to be discarded, that it didn't matter, that there was no humanity there.
When I became pregnant for the first time, I had been raised to be pro-choice. That was something that just made perfect sense to me. You know, all good, respectable people were pro-choice.
I remember, you know, saying out loud that, you know, well, you know, pregnancy becomes a baby when the mother decides that she wants to be a mom. I mean, I just, you know, all of these crazy, illogical things that I had convinced myself of while I worked there just suddenly became very, it was very apparent to me that those had all been untrue.
My junior year, I want to say it was my junior year, I kind of wanted to break up with my boyfriend. And in the process of breaking up with him, I got pregnant. I was probably, I want to say 16 or 17 years old. I remember going to my guidance counselor and saying, what do I do? Where do I go? And she says, well, there's really no other option, you know, and she sent me to an abortion clinic.
We always say that, you know, the answer to a crisis pregnancy is not abortion, that abortion is not going to eliminate the crisis. It is only going to escalate that crisis. It's going to compound the crises in your life, you know, these situations that you're going through, and it will leave a lifelong scar in your soul and in your spirit, and it's something that will never go away. You can heal from it, but just like any scar, that reminder will always be there.
When my sister Bella was born 6 years ago, I was 17 years old, I believe, and I can tell you, you know, everyone in our family was really in shock, and you go through a grieving period. You know, Bella was diagnosed with what they considered was a lethal diagnosis, trisomy 18. 99% of children with her condition don't make it to birth. The majority of the reason why is because they're aborted. We need to be more on the, you know, on the front lines of this issue of the pro-life debate, you know, really pro-woman debate, right? And because so many of these kids, you know, if you hear statistics like that and you're a young woman and you're scared and you're considering whether or not to have a child, you know, they're going to push for you to make a choice, right? And often that leads to abortion.
So I knew then that I was going to have to leave. I didn't know what that was going to look like, but I knew I had to get out. I knew I couldn't be a part of that anymore, and it took me about a week to leave. I didn't want to leave my job. I didn't want to leave the money I made, honestly. I didn't want to leave all of my friends behind. I didn't want to leave that identity, because that had been me for so long. For 8 years, I thought, I don't know who I am if I'm not this person. And but ultimately, I knew that I had to leave. I had to get out, and so I made that decision and actually contacted a pro-life group in my community and told them that I wanted to leave and I needed their help. and they just kind of hit the ground running, and they were trying to help me in all these different ways, and then when Planned Parenthood found out that I was actually, I'd gone to the pro-life group, they took me to court, and they were concerned about proprietary information, business information getting out, and certainly did not want me to talk about all the things that I had seen inside the abortion industry.
For specific specimens, the compensation would be higher because we know you're going to run into problems.
There's going to be more.
How do we frame that so that we're not saying we're giving a higher?
I have been talking to the executive director of the National Abortion Federation. We're trying to figure this out as an industry about how we're going to manage remuneration. The headlines would be disaster.
We agreed that $100 would keep you happy.
I think so.
Well, let me agree to find out from other affiliates in California what they're getting. And if they're getting substantially more, then we can discuss it again.
Yes.
But the money is not the important thing.
No,
It has to be big enough that it's
but
worthwhile
it
giving
is something to talk about. I mean, it's one of the first things that you brought up, right? So.
Years since I talked about compensation, so let me just figure out what others are getting, and if this is in the ballpark, and that's fine. If it's still low, then we can talk about it. I want a Lamborghini. I said I want a Lamborghini.
It wasn't until I actually left Planned Parenthood that the full realization of what I had done to my own children kind of sunk in. I mean, I've had 2 abortions. At the time, I remember just feeling relieved that, okay, it was over, it was done. This bad decision making in my life can now be a big secret, and nobody will have to know, and abortion's legal, so it can't be that bad, right, if it's legal. And
my dad tells the story that he, during the 1990s partial birth abortion debate, he was on the floor of the Senate debating for many hours, and got off, and it looks like they were going to lose the vote by a couple votes, and so he was really disheartened. Calls my mom on the phone, late at night, and he says, honey, I know it's late, but I just need to get out there, and maybe some senator who could change his mind is watching TV right now, and I just need to talk about this vote. It's important. And she said, okay, I love you, do what you need to do. So he's out there pouring out his heart, alone on the Senate floor, late at night, and, of course the next day he loses, the vote, right? So gets home late, my mom's asleep, the kids are asleep. He says, that next day I felt like not only a bad legislator, but a bad husband, a bad father. He's like, I felt so kind of disappointed in myself, but it was like, Lord, I was trying to do your work, but what happened? And then several weeks later, he got an email from a young man in Michigan, I believe. And it said, Senator, my girlfriend and I were watching TV a few weeks ago, and we flipped to C-SPAN and just kept watching. And I looked down and she's crying, and I asked her why. And she said, I'm pregnant and I was going to have an abortion, but I know I can't now.
It was the reality of knowing, after seeing an ultrasound, that my baby wasn't just a wart, it was a person. And that if the person that I was carrying was fully human, it struck me that there's nothing that's unique about her just because I happen to be carrying her, that status exists for all the unborn. It's not a question of my choice or what I want. It's that objectively, this is a person. And I knew right away that I was called to protect and love this person.
There's a lot of people that all they can do is pray. You know, they're elderly, they're homebound, whatever it may be, and they pray, and that's enough. That's fantastic. But for those of us that can get out there and can do something more, we ought to be. It's not just enough just to say we're pro-life, but we have to actually be pro-life. And that takes conviction and it takes courage. And it's not always popular to be pro-life. That's okay. God didn't send us here to win a popularity contest. It's not always politically correct to be pro-life, but that's okay, because we are here to proclaim the truth of God. And sometimes that's going to go against popular opinion. Sometimes that's going to go against our political system. But in the end, we're not going to be held accountable for how well we fit in with different groups. We're going to be held accountable for how well we spoke the message of God and how we lived out that lifestyle and how we lived out the gospel of life. Prayer is absolutely important, but coupled with that has to be action. It has to be a spirit of urgency. I mean, babies are dying every day. And I think if we really could understand the evil of abortion, if we really could understand the pain that this brings the heart of God, we would have no choice but to be out there and to be active and to be doing something. And so, I just encourage people to, really sit down and consider how abortion is affecting our society, how it's affecting our culture. And I think once we really understand that, once we really understand what's happening to these babies during an abortion and how these moms are affected, how dads are affected, how families are affected, it ought to spur us into action to do more.